I'm gay and I'm proud.
LGBTQ is an initialism that stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and the queer. LGBTQ community is in support of homosexuality, which can be interpreted to mean attraction or sexual behavior between members of the same sex or gender, rather an enduring pattern of emotional, romantic, and sexual attraction to the people of the same sex. LGBTQ history dates back to the first recorded instance of same-sex love and sexuality of the ancient civilization, involving the history of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and the transgender people and cultures around the world. What survives after many centuries of persecution resulting in shame, suppression, and secrecy has only in more recent decades been pursued and interwoven into more mainstream historical narratives.
I believe in the principle of treating people equally under the law, and that they are deserving of equal protection under the law.
Members of the LGBT community waiting in anticipation for the three-judge bench whose decision would no doubt have far-reaching consequences for them.
In 1994, the annual observance of the LGBTQ History Month began in the United States, and it has since been picked up in other countries. This observance involved highlights with history of the people of the LGBTQ. LGBT rights and related civil rights movements. It is observed during October in the United States to include National Coming Out Day on October 11th. Homosexuality dates back in Africa to the roots in Egypt. In Kenya, it dates back to the pre-colonial era where the communities like Meru and the Kikuyu had traditional leaders who dressed like women and plaited their hair just like women did, married to men and lived under the same roof. The Swahili community came up with the name Mashoga to refer to men who got married to men and did womanly house chores. But after Kenya gained its independence in the 1963, Mzee Jomo Kenyatta said there was no word like homosexuality in Kenya, and it was foreign and totally un-African. His successor, President Moi, too said that Kenya had no time and room for homosexuals, and it was against African norms. In the year 2006, the gay and lesbian formed a union that was fighting for legalization of the LGBTQ community. But in 2019, the High Court upheld illegality of same-sex marriages and declared that LGBTQ community is unconstitutional.
Even though we are not persuaded by the petitioner's contention that the provisions and the challenge are overboard.
Consolidated petitions have no merit. We hereby decline the relief sought and dismiss the consolidated petition.
Sodomy is a felony per section 162 of the Kenyan Penal Code, punishable by 14 years imprisonment, and any sexual practices between males termed as gross indecency are a felony under section 165 of the same statute, punishable by 5 years imprisonment. While female same-sexual activity is not explicitly prohibited by the law, lesbian, bisexual women, and transgender persons are not recognized in the Kenyan Constitution and are discriminated against covertly, as well as undergo corrective rape practices by heterosexual men. In addition, the country's gross indecency can be used against lesbian women who engage in the same-sex act. Same-sex marriage is banned under the Kenyan Constitution since 2010. There are no explicit protection against discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity. Adoption is prohibited to same-sex couples. Homosexuality is illegal in Kenya, activities says, and that many are afraid to report the abuse or get medical help because of the stigma. Homophobia, which is the fear, hatred, discomfort with, or mistrust of the people who are lesbian, gay, or bisexual, is solidly rooted within the Kenyan religious and political rhetoric, and has a long history of state-sponsored discrimination and violations against LGBTQ Kenyans to gain political mileage. Homophobic political and religious actors often go into painstaking details to describe to the public an alleged sexual deviance and immorality of sexual acts between men, yet rarely discuss such practices and relationships amongst women.
For Kenyans today, the issue of gay rights is really a non-issue. We want to focus on other areas that are day-to-day living for our people.
Men in love and or engaging in sexual acts with each other triggers deep hate and rampant violence. Gay men are widely held as morally corrupt, dirty, and promiscuous, whereas LGBTQ women are generally considered mere victims. In popular imaginations, they are often framed as victims of abuse by men, of peer influence at boarding schools, for instance, or of westernization. These limitations within the public debate have contributed to the profound lack of understanding of female queerness in Kenya. Most anti-lesbian sentiments maintain that romantic relationships and sexual practices among women are deviant and unnatural. The homophobic political elite, championed by the anti-gay caucus in Kenyan parliament, recently referred to lesbianism as a cult that seeks to recruit young bright girls. It even named a few of the more visible lesbian activists in the country as the high priestess of the alleged cult. For example, the former BBC McKenna Jerry, who recently came out as a member of the LGBTQ community. This speaks to the existing myth that shapes dominant discourse. In March 2014, a dangerous spike of violence against LGBTQ people in Kenya was observed when anti-gay caucus called for citizens' arrest of gays and lesbians. These incidents steadily increased immediately after the presentation of the Kenya Anti-Homosexuality Draft Bill in July 2014. LGBTQ rights are human rights that are meant to promote a position of social and legal equality of lesbians, gays, bisexuals, and the queer people in society. These rights address injustice against members of the LGBTQ community by outlawing discrimination and violence, requiring changes in law in areas such as access to health, education, public benefits, and the recognition of people living within the society. Trans men and women from across the world unfortunately still face discrimination, rejection, and hardship on a daily basis simply because of who they are. Take Lily, for instance. She's a young trans woman from Kenya and was rejected by her family when she came out as transgender. After a long struggle, Lily has now unfortunately found happiness. These people face challenges of recognition. The trans people submitted a memorandum on the 2016 health bill seeking to be legally recognized and to curb the stigma associated with the trans identity. The law has remained unchanged.
Health-seeking behavior of the LGBTI, that is gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender, is characterized by delays, self-medication, and people presenting themselves for health to the health practitioners only when it's too late.
Kenya President Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta rejected any gay agenda to be tabled in a global population conference. He said that he will not accept practices that are at conflict with Kenyan cultures and that Kenya will stand to protect cultural norms by not allowing any practices that will be seen devaluing traditions of various local communities. Harassment, arrest and detention is becoming part of the LGBTQ person's life.
There's no place that is safe. It's all about keeping a low profile rather than keeping high profile. I was also recently beaten and attacked by the Kenyan homophobic people. They really hurt me and no one could actually engage themselves into the matter, the onlookers. So the situation was really very much worse. So I was beaten and left for dead.
Inclusivity is still foreign for LGBTQ persons to most of the mainstream organization, and they try to sideline them because they feel like they do not deserve to be in those spaces, get opportunities or resources available because of who they are. LGBTQ people continue to face discrimination and oppression in their personal lives, in the workplace and the public sphere, and in their access to critical health care. This experience of discrimination leads to many adverse consequences for their financial, mental, and physical well-being. Many LGBTQ people report altering their lives to avoid this discrimination and the trauma associated with the unequal treatment. Younger generations generally report higher levels of discrimination and problem that older generations do not go through. In the year 2021, the number of the LGBTQ community consists of 8% of the world population, and the number just keeps getting higher as time goes by. This is a community that has been accepted by law in the superpower continent, United States of America, after being same-sex marriages being legalized in 2013 by former President Barack Obama and the Pope Francis, blessing same-sex marriage in churches.
Tonight, Pope Francis voicing support for same-sex civil unions, the first pope in history to do so.
The narrative is different in Africa because it is considered foreign and against African norms and tradition, and in other countries such as Senegal, being a homosexual is punishable by death. One of the things that society does to marginalize certain group of people is to ignore them and pretend that they are invincible. The truth is, we all have a long way to go as far as community is concerned, because the fact that the law criminalizes you gives everyone a chance to harm you. To accept the gay person to express themselves fully and implement their demand is something which is likely to happen if it takes long period of time. Although slowly, they have started getting recognition around the country. However, what this community is crying out for is for public to at least treat them with human dignity they deserve. Years back, one would never have thought that Kenya could get the point that LGBTQ community would go to court and fight for their rights. This generation is much braver group of individuals trying to ensure other Kenyans learn to love, live, and accept themselves for who they are. LGBTQ community is also trying to help other Kenyans understand their lives.